What is a recession? Because it's on everyone's mind. Not to mention, it's on everyone's lips.
Probability of a recession.
Are we going to get a recession this year?
Towards a recession.
A recession's on the way.
Another recession.
So what's all the hubbub? Well, I'm going to tell you in simple English what a recession is, what causes one, whether or not we're headed towards one, and I'm going to give you 7 steps that you can take to prepare yourself so that you won't even feel it. You ready? Let's go. Hi, my name is Matt Theriault, CEO of Epic Real Estate, where we show people how to invest in real estate so they can escape the daily grind and retire early. Now, you might have heard last week that the GDP, the gross domestic product, shrank 1.4%, and everyone's talking about it. So what does that mean? Well, the GDP is the standard measure of the value on whether or not an economy is growing. When it's negative, it's contracting, and when it's positive, it's growing. So we've contracted, we shrank 1.4%. We didn't grow. That's what happened. So what could that mean? Well, it could mean recession. So what's a recession? Well, simply put, it's when we experience 2 consecutive quarters of negative economic growth, like the quarter we just had. And that's typically characterized by high unemployment, low or negative GDP growth, falling income, and slowing retail sales. So we just had one of these negative growth quarters. Will we have a consecutive one that would officially put us into a recession? Well, recessions are notoriously difficult to predict. But as a potential indicator, the people over at Wells Fargo suggest that you watch for a telltale sign in the yield curve. You see, if the slope between the 10-year Treasury yield, the blue line, and its 1-year counterpart, the red line, invert, it could be evidence of an impending recession. Now, that has not happened since March 2020, as you can see here. That was just before the COVID-19 pandemic shut down of the economy and triggered a recession, albeit the shortest one in history. Now, there are a growing number of Wall Street banks that are forecasting an economic recession in the coming years as a result of the Russian war in Ukraine, the red-hot inflation, and an increasingly hawkish Federal Reserve. However, there are others that are doubting a recession. And President Biden, he's not concerned.
I'm not concerned about a recession.
Yet, one of Biden's favorite economists thinks he should be. And I'll get to him in just a minute. Like I said, recessions are notoriously difficult to predict. But if we look at what causes them, perhaps you'll have a little bit more insight and be able to make your own prediction. I mean, why not make your own prediction? As some people say, economists, they exist just to make weather forecasters look good.
It looks like Ruben is in the lead, and here comes out.
So if you know what causes them, you'll know what to look for. And that's about all the experts have to work with too. So you couldn't do any worse. The 3 most frequent causes for recessions are either an economy that's overheating, or an asset bubble popping, or an economic shock. So first, overheating. This is when an economy's demand for goods and services is outpacing the supply of goods and services. And you can tell by 2 key characteristics: rising inflation and unemployment below its natural rate, which causes growth to occur at an unsustainable rate. Almost every recession since World War II has featured a run-up in inflation before the recession began. The largest was the 8 percentage point increase in inflation before the 1980 recession. So just this March, the consumer price index jumped to 8.5%. So it's got the Fed's attention, as they're warning us that in order to tame the sky-high prices, they'll probably be implementing a series of mega interest rate hikes. Now, some economists believe that the Fed waited too long to confront this burst in inflation, while others have expressed concerns that moving too quickly with these hikes could trigger the actual recession itself. So why the hikes? What are those going to do? Well, they're going to raise the interest rates because they tend to create higher interest rates on consumer and business loans specifically, which slows the economy by forcing employers to cut back on spending, with the idea that if they reduce the demand, it'll allow the supply to catch up and then even out. Fed Chairman Jerome Powell, he's pushing back on the too quickly theory though, as he remains optimistic that he can strike a delicate balance between taming inflation with monetary tightening without crushing the economy. We'll see. And in his defense, he's not saying it's going to be easy, but he's going to give it a go with all the tools and resources he's got. We wish him well. Anyway, now you understand how the overheating of an economy can produce a recession. The second common cause of a recession is the bursting of an asset bubble. And this is actually a type of overheating. And it's likely this is how our two previous recessions came about. Although neither featured a large increase in price inflation, both featured the rapid growth and subsequent bursting of an asset bubble. The 2001 recession was preceded by the dot-com bubble burst, and the 2007 to 2009 recession was preceded by the bursting of the housing bubble. Asset bubbles, they develop when the economy is thriving and investors in a particular asset class purchase large quantities of that asset based on the belief that it will sell for a higher price. But if those asset prices hit a wall and then fall, and if enough people had significant exposure to that asset, it could empty the pockets of people all across the country. The third cause of a recession is an economic shock. You see, it's not always some type of overheating that causes a recession. Negative, unexpected external events, referred to as shocks by economists, have the power to disrupt growth too. A classic example is the oil shocks of the 1970s and 1980s. For instance, in 1979, oil output, it dropped by about 4% as a result of the Iranian Revolution, causing mass panic, which then drove prices higher. The price of crude oil more than doubled, and that shock pushed the US and other countries into a recession. The COVID-19 pandemic is another example of a shock, which triggered one of the most severe but briefest recessions in US history when the economy was almost completely shut down. In hindsight, probably not the best move, but hey, nothing we can do about it now. The US economy lost 22 million jobs and unemployment surged to 14.7%, the highest since the Great Depression. So I don't know, could the Russian invasion of Ukraine be such a shock? Could the excessive printing of money have caused economic overheating? Could the housing market once again be an asset bubble that's about to burst? Or could we be seeing all three of these converge? Again, it's really tough to predict, but let me know your thoughts in the comments below. I want to know what you think. The experts, they're certainly chiming in with their predictions at every chance that they can get. For example, despite President Biden's lack of concern, Mark Zandi, chief economist at Moody's, as well as one that is frequently cited by the Biden administration, said last week in a White House talk that he believes the odds of a recession within the next 2 years is somewhere around 35%. And then on the other side, you have LPL Financial's chief market strategist, Ryan Dietrich, who is much more optimistic about avoiding a recession. He's citing some early signs of inflation hitting its peak, with used car prices having dropped significantly the last 2 months in a row, and shipping prices globally are down 30%. He also notes that a 1.4% drop in the GDP is small and has not always resulted in a recession, so it's not a given. And he's predicting a second quarter bounce back with an overall GDP growth of 3% for the whole year. But I get it, it's tough to be optimistic when the common sentiment is so negative and bearish. But as General Patton once said, when everyone is thinking alike, someone isn't thinking. There very well could be opportunity staring us straight in the face. So what is one to do? Downturn or not, it's probably not a bad idea to get your wallet in shape for whatever the economy may throw at us. And here are 7 places for you to look in evaluating your financial health. Number 1, pay down high interest credit card balances. Because if the Fed follows through on multiple interest rate hikes this year, that's going to have an influence on many forms of short-term borrowing like adjustable rate credit cards. So if an emergency hits, these could be your most costly monthly expenses. Number 2, assess your finances before paying off other debt, whether that be mortgages, student loans, or auto loans, because it might not make sense to use up all of your cash to pay down long-term debts that have relatively low fixed interest rates. Number 3, add to your emergency fund. Assembling 6 months of living expenses, that can seem like a daunting task, but don't underestimate the power of small contributions. Automate them if you can. This book right here, Profit First, it changed my life around small automated savings contributions, so check it out. Number 4, identify ways to cut back. If you're at a loss of how you can actually build on your emergency fund, it's a good idea to go through your monthly expenses and identify which items are discretionary and which items are necessary. Eliminate some or all of the discretionary items that you can live without for a while. Number 5, don't make knee-jerk reactions with your investments. You know, whether you're 20 years old or 20 months from retirement, resist with all your might from making changes that jeopardize your long-term financial security based on a short-term economic event. I mean, even if you're on the cusp of retirement, retirement is going to last 25 to 30 years for you. A recession might just last a year or so, maybe less. Number 6, think about your career and earnings opportunities. You know, to recession-proof a career, many will pursue additional or higher education. You know, that's the traditional advice. But the recession is almost certain to be over by the time that new degree is in your hand. So consider a part-time business or side hustle instead, or in addition to. Because in the days of the internet, it's never been easier to do. I mean, you can pick at garage sales and then resell on eBay. You can teach or tutor, and you can do that online or off. You can become a freelance writer. You can become a rideshare driver. You can put your car up for short-term rental on the app Turo, or you can flip sneakers or flip houses. If you like the sound of that one, go ahead and meet me over at reiace.com. Answer a few questions, and we can hop on the phone to discuss and brainstorm some ideas about that for you. And number 7, don't panic. Recessions are inevitable, and it can be a scary thought, especially for Americans who have lived through 2 back-to-back once-in-a-lifetime recessions, the coronavirus pandemic and the Great Recession before it. I mean, think back on all the other times in life that you were worried about the future, where you had major concern, whether it be something really big like the economy or something small like what the kids are going to say Monday at school about your new haircut. You made it through each one of them, and here you are, alive and kicking. So whether this is another historic event or just a blip on the radar that we experience, it's going to be just like that. It's going to pass. So the bottom line is nobody knows what's going to happen. The complexity of the macroeconomy is just that, complex. And if recessions were easily predictable and preventable, we'd be doing just that. So there's never a bad time to evaluate your finances and check in with yourself. So I gave you 7 things to look at to get you started. So don't focus on what's happening. Focus on what you want to have happen, and everything's gonna be all right. So what'd you find most valuable? Let me know below. And who else do you know that needs to see this? When their name comes to mind, please share it with them. Oh, and if you're already subscribed, I pulled this video out right here for you to watch next. Otherwise, I'll see you next time. Thanks for watching. Take care.